Imagine this. You're 22 years old. You've just played the game of your life in Belgrade. You're laughing with your best mates on the plane home, talking about winning the European Cup. You're Manchester United. You're the Busby Babes. You're supposed to be immortal. And then, the plane doesn't take off. It tries once. It fails. It tries again. It fails. On the third attempt, at 3:04 in the afternoon on February 6th, 1958, everything goes black. In 90 seconds, 8 of the most gifted young footballers on earth were gone, and the beautiful game would never be the same again. This is the story they don't teach you in school. This is the Munich air disaster. If this is your first time here, you're about to discover stories that will change the way you see football forever. Hit that subscribe button and the bell icon, because every week we uncover the stories that shaped the game. Now, let's go back to 1958. To understand what was lost that day, you first need to understand what Matt Busby had built. And let me tell you, as someone who's spent decades studying this game, what Busby created at Old Trafford was nothing short of a miracle. After World War II, English football was rebuilding. Most clubs bought their players. Busby? He grew them. He was a visionary, maybe 30 years ahead of his time. He set up one of the first modern youth academies in English football, scouring schools and local leagues across Britain for raw talent. And the talent he found? My God! There was Duncan Edwards. And if you've never heard of Duncan Edwards, stop everything and listen. This lad was playing for Manchester United's first team at 15 years old. 15! He was built like a heavyweight boxer, but moved like a ballet dancer. He could tackle like a center half, pass like a number 10, and shoot like a number 9. Many who saw him play, including Sir Bobby Charlton, who we'll come to, said he was the greatest English footballer who ever lived. Not Beckham, not Rooney, not Gascoigne, Duncan Edwards. Then there was Tommy Taylor, the striker with the golden head who could score from anywhere. Roger Byrne, the captain, a natural leader who commanded respect from everyone at the club. Eddie Coleman, the snake hips. A little inside forward with feet so quick they said the ball was sewn to his boots. Mark Jones, David Pegg, Liam Whelan, Jeff Bent, every single one of them. International caliber. By 1958, the Busby Babes had won 2 consecutive First Division titles and were making waves in the European Cup, a tournament the English Football League had initially banned English clubs from entering. Busby fought that ban. He wanted his boys on the biggest stage. He wanted them to play the best in Europe. And that decision would lead them to Munich. Now I want you to think about this. If Duncan Edwards had survived, would he be considered the greatest of all time? Drop your thoughts in the comments. On February 5th, 1958, Manchester United traveled to Belgrade, Yugoslavia, for a European Cup quarter-final second leg against Red Star Belgrade. They'd won the first leg 2-1 at Old Trafford, but Belgrade was a hostile place to play. United drew 3-3 in a thriller. Bobby Charlton scored twice, Dennis Violet once. It was enough. A 5-4 aggregate win. They were through to the semifinals. The mood on the plane was electric. The team boarded British European Airways Flight 609, a chartered airspeed ambassador, known as the Elizabethan class. The plane was headed to Manchester but needed to refuel in Munich. It was a routine stop, nothing unusual. The players played cards, some journalists, and there were several on board, including the legendary Frank Swift, former Manchester City goalkeeper turned reporter, were already typing their match reports. When they landed in Munich, it was snowing. The runway was covered in slush. The temperature had dropped below freezing. Captain James Thane and co-pilot Kenneth Raymond prepared for takeoff. Nobody on that plane knew they had less than 30 minutes to live. The first attempt, the plane accelerates down the runway. The engines sound wrong. A strange boost surging, what the pilots called overboosting. Captain Thane aborts. The plane rolls back. Second attempt, same problem. The engines surge unevenly. Abort again. The plane returns to the terminal. Now here's where fate intervenes. Some passengers wanted to get off. The fear was palpable, but the crew reassured everyone. It's just a technical check, standard procedure. The pilots consulted. They believed the issue was manageable. They decided to try once more. Third attempt, 3:04 p.m. The plane accelerates. This time, it reaches the end of the runway, but it doesn't lift. The slush on the runway is too deep. The aircraft can't reach takeoff speed. It overruns the runway, crashes through a fence, hits a house, and strikes a fuel storage hut. The left side of the fuselage is torn apart. The fuel ignites. In the chaos, in the snow, in the fire and the smoke, the Busby Babes were dying. Harry Gregg, the United goalkeeper, a giant of a man from Northern Ireland, was one of the first to regain consciousness. He heard a baby crying. Through the smoke and the twisted metal, Gregg pulled a mother and her baby from the wreckage. Then he went back in. He found Bobby Charlton and Dennis Viollet, both unconscious, and dragged them to safety. Think about that for a moment. A man who just survived a plane crash went back into a burning aircraft to save his teammates. Harry Gregg was never given a medal for what he did that day. He should have been knighted on the spot. 23 of the 44 people on board died, either immediately or in the days that followed. Among them, 8 Manchester United players: Roger Byrne, Jeff Bent, Eddie Coleman, Mark Jones, David Pegg, Tommy Taylor, Liam Whelan, and Duncan Edwards, who fought for his life in a Munich hospital for 15 days before finally succumbing to his injuries on February 21st. He was 21 years old. Matt Busby himself nearly died. He was given the last rites twice. Twice, the doctors told his family to prepare for the worst, but Busby, tough as old boots, stubborn as a mule, he held on. Bobby Charlton survived with minor injuries. So did Bill Folks, Dennis Viollet, Albert Scanlon, Kenny Morgans, Ray Wood, and Jackie Blanchflower. Though Blanchflower's injuries were so severe he never played professional football again. Johnny Berry, one of United's wingers, survived but sustained such catastrophic brain injuries that his playing career was over. He was never the same man again. The football world was devastated. Messages of condolence poured in from every corner of the globe. Real Madrid, United's great European rivals, offered to lend them players. The entire city of Manchester went into mourning. But the question that hung over everything was this: could Manchester United even continue to exist? What would you have done if you were Matt Busby? Would you have come back? Or would the grief have been too much? Tell me in the comments. When Busby finally recovered, months later, scarred physically and psychologically, he faced an impossible choice: retire, walk away, grieve in peace. Nobody would have blamed him. Or rebuild. He chose to rebuild. Jimmy Murphy. Busby's assistant, who hadn't been on the plane because he was managing Wales in a World Cup qualifier, had been holding the club together. Murphy, a man of iron will, had literally picked up the broken pieces. He signed emergency players. He promoted youth players who weren't ready. He somehow got Manchester United to the FA Cup final in 1958, just 3 months after Munich. They lost that final to Bolton Wanderers. But just getting there was one of the greatest achievements in the history of sport. Over the next decade, Busby rebuilt slowly, painfully, purposefully. He signed Dennis Law. he nurtured George Best, a Belfast boy who would become the most talented footballer Britain had ever produced. And Bobby Charlton, the Munich survivor, became the heartbeat of the new team, as all of this was building toward one night in May 1968. May 29, 1968, Wembley Stadium, the European Cup Final, Manchester United versus Benfica. Think about the symbolism. 10 years after Munich, Busby's new team, with Charlton, Best, and Law, on the biggest stage in European football. This wasn't just a football match. This was a pilgrimage. This was Busby finishing what the Babes had started. The match went to extra time, 1-1 after 90 minutes, and then, in those extra 30 minutes, United exploded. George Best danced past the Benfica goalkeeper for the second goal. Bobby Charlton, the boy who'd been pulled from the burning wreckage, headed in the third. A fourth followed. Manchester United 4, Benfica 1. When the final whistle blew, the cameras found Matt Busby, this giant of a man, this survivor, this architect of 2 generations of football brilliance, had tears streaming down his face. He'd done it. Not just for himself, for Roger, for Duncan, for Tommy, for Eddie, for every soul lost in the Munich snow. Bobby Charlton said later, "When I looked at the boss after the final whistle, I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was thinking of them, the boys, the Babes. They were with us that night." The Munich air disaster didn't just change Manchester United. It changed football. It led to improvements in air safety regulations across Europe. It showed the world that a football club can be more than just a team. It can be a symbol of resilience, of love, of the unbreakable human spirit. Every year on February 6th, the clock at Old Trafford is stopped at 3:04, the time of the crash. Flowers are laid. Silence is observed. And the names of the fallen are read aloud, one by one. Duncan Edwards, Roger Byrne, Tommy Taylor, Eddie Coleman, Mark Jones, David Pegg, Liam Whelan, Jeff Bent. They were young, they were brilliant, they were taken too soon, but they are never forgotten. If this story moved you, do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this with someone who loves football, and subscribe to this channel. Because next week, we're telling another story that will shake you to your core. I'm your host at Football Untold. This is where the real stories live. See you next time.